Our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 144 for August 14th, 2019. My name is Jason Neifer. I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the fabulous University of Montana campus in the Phyllis J. Washington College of Education. And joining me as always, good evening, Dr. Wes Fryer.
Good evening, Jason, and welcome to everybody, where we are hopefully connecting on both YouTube and Facebook Live with our little StreamYard solution. So I gotta get this right, the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at Cassidy School here in Oklahoma City. And we are in the midst of our week of professional development meetings that we always have back to school. We will be having students return next week. And Jason, I understand you might be receiving a few emails these days from folks involved in the Montana Digital Academy. Is that rumor at all accurate, or is it disinformation?
You have a good source of information, sir, and it's we have counselors reporting back in the last 2 weeks of school, or I'm sorry, the last 2 weeks of the weeks, and schools start in Montana starting in a week or two, and then there'll be staggered starts across the state. The last school I know of starts the second week of September. So diversity in starting dates, which means counselors are back, and my program, which is a state supplemental program that offers distance learning opportunities to students across the state, will begin the day after Labor Day. So we are working with schools. I had to kind of remind myself out loud yesterday. I was, doing plate spinning email responses, which is daily reality during the August setup of my program, that I want to make sure that if I'm writing a nuanced email, one that requires a little more savvy, something a little more gentle of language, that perhaps I don't just shoot off a quick 2-line answer and send it off. So I did send out a couple emails yesterday that were a little quick and needed a little more gentleness than I attributed to it. But that's a lesson I have to reteach myself occasionally when answering the mass of emails. And I'm guessing, Wes, that you probably aren't answering a ton of support requests right now.
I am in nirvana, as it were. I have hung up my IT director wand. Have loved doing that for 4 years, but I'm getting to do a pivot to instructional technology. So I have moved my physical office, and I'm not being assaulted by cats, as it were. Actually, that was good.
Actually, that's a dog.
It was a dog. It was a dog. I'm so used to cats, intervening there. Remind us of the name of.
This is Louie. This is our new puppy. He's been here for 2.5 months. And he's still very puppy. So lots of chewing and lots of attention. And he physically injured me in 7 different parts of my body when I took him for a walk the other night. So we need to work on the harness a little bit, and we're going to get a better situation. But he is a very strong boy, right? Louie, come here.
All right. Wow.
Louie.
Hey, well, shout out to Peggy George joining us from YouTube. There is a chat app that I have just downloaded called the Restream Chat. And apparently, cool. Interesting. I can send chat from it to Facebook, but it's read-only chat on. I can send chat to YouTube, but it's read-only from Facebook. So we do want to point everybody to the list of links, which Jason has wonderfully curated, and I'm going to be rapidly adding to. I'm continuing to use my if this then that recipe of whenever I tweet with the hashtag EdTechSR, it puts us into a different Google Doc that I have to just kind of move it around. And so anyway, I will be doing that, and probably giving Jason the microphone first. Would you like to summarize for us, Dr. Neifer, what this wonderful opportunity, which we unfortunately missed out on last week, and so we're going to be catching up on 2 weeks, I think. What is it that we're going to be doing here for the next approximately 55 minutes?
Well, the EdTech Situation Room is a podcast that takes a look at news headlines from across the techosphere and kind of looks at them from an educational landscape. We obviously, technology has found its way into many corners of our life and society, but how tech best supports learning in schools is something that both Dr. Fryer and I are very interested in as concepts, and also it's really been our life's work to try to find the best ways to integrate technology in classroom and learning environments. This week, our links are available at our website, edtechsr.com, and usually there's a lot more links than we have the chance to get to in any given week because there is a lot of tech news out there. And so if you're curious about what was interesting to us as we looked through the tech news of the time, you can go to our website, again, edtechsr.com/links, and that is available as a link on the bottom of our screen if you're watching live on YouTube or the YouTube archive later. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with maybe a relatively quiet one for the week, just because I think we need to start keeping an eye on this. Recode reported on August 7th that America's digital divide, which is becoming an issue that it was a big deal 20 years ago. You heard a lot about digital divide, and then there was a perception that the digital divide was decreasing, in part, in my opinion, because of mobile devices. The inexpensiveness of mobile devices is really a way that's met the digital divide, and then now it's becoming back again. And then a great part of that is because of rural sites in the United States, places that are off the beaten path, as it were. And as a lifelong resident of the state of Montana, I understand rural areas. Montana is a huge state. If Montana was a nation, it would be the 60th largest nation on earth from a geographical standpoint, larger than Germany and France and Japan. So I want to be clear that when I say we have rural areas, it's not a small part of our state. The vastness of our state has not small towns, like towns with 1, 2, 3,000. Those exist here. We also have hundreds of small incorporated, unincorporated cities here, and rural America, including rural Montana, has a real mixed bag when it comes to broadband access and also the ability to wire up things like schools. And so this is not a political podcast. I can assure you, you don't want Wes and I to ramble on about politics, but I will say that something that's interesting about election 2020 is that there has been a real lack of deep discussions in issues like policy issues that impact Americans on a day-to-day basis. And the political science in me could give you some reasons why that's the case. But Elizabeth Warren has released a plan on how she plans to at least deal with some of the larger digital divide, focusing on rural America. And it's investing of about $60 billion in things like fiber initiatives and other broadband initiatives to try to do those areas of the United States that have not been the wide benefit of broadband access. So I'm assuming, I would say that I know this for a fact. There are rural areas in Oklahoma too, right, Wes?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got over 500 school districts, most of which have less than 200 students. And our largest school districts are Oklahoma City and Tulsa, but we are dominated by rural schools numerically, and the urban-rural divide is actually a pretty big thing politically for us on some different issues. But yes, Oklahoma is a rural state, and although we're not nearly the geographic behemoth that Montana is, the issues of rural education and then the divides which exist are certainly familiar to us.
So, and I would say for me, I'm very encouraged this issue's make it into the national conscious, if it is, as it were. But I will say we need to be careful how we fund broadband expansion initiatives. One thing that it's a big frustration to me is that a prominent top 4 mobile telecom, who I will not name by name right now, did accept a lot of money from the federal government to expand out into areas of rural America, and that effort was mixed in results. And now other groups trying to access existing federal funds to help expand broadband access in those areas are being told that funds aren't available because those areas are already covered according to the people that took the money the first time around, even though there's not. And I have some experience in this, in that as part of my job, I do a lot of site visits. I see a lot of schools. I'm a guy that has a cell phone all the time, so I am in parts of the state a lot and I'm currently on T-Mobile. T-Mobile is surprisingly solid in Montana, even though it's been here for only 3 years. They have pretty decent coverage in even very rural parts of the state. but I see this and I see that gap, and we talk to schools all the time that want students to be able to take distance learning classes, but at home, right? They want to be able to take a seventh class in their day or an eighth class and largely complete the class at home. And while the school has decent broadband, someone living on a ranch that's outside the two-way highway in their part of the state by 4 or 5 miles may not have access to even wireless internet, right? And so they have to rely on increasingly fast but very expensive satellite internet, which is just not a reality if you're talking about modern multimedia in a learning environment. So something to keep in mind. I encourage you, no matter what your political persuasion is, to talk to candidates, local, state, and federal, about what they're doing for schools, but in particular how they're helping bridge gaps that do still exist between kids that have access to technology and broadband and kids that don't.
Absolutely. Hey, shout out to my friend Jim Bauer, who's tuning in on YouTube Live. As expected, we are reaching a wider audience as a result of our little StreamYard and Restream experiments here. I'd like to actually do a quick one that's just kind of sign of the times, and then get into a serious one. I put this one, Jason, under Election 2020. It's the New York Times article, How YouTube Radicalized Brazil. But before we talk about that, this is a fast one I put down under generational culture clash. This came to us from The Guardian on August 13th. Teen's tweets from her smart fridge go viral after mother confiscates phone. So there is a student who is evidently a bit of a YouTuber, and her mother got mad. I think the article says when she wasn't paying attention in the kitchen and a fire started, and it had to do with social media. So anyway, mom decided to take away the smartphone and Twitter access, and it actually tweeted something like, "I am shutting this channel down." And so the teen was able to get onto their Wii and send some tweets out to the fans waiting with bated breath. Mom was able to get wise to that. And so then the teen was able to use, I think, their LG smart refrigerator, which can also communicate on the Twitter platform. And, on tweets, you can see what client is used. And so evidently there's, some verification there, seeing that, yes, the tweet was sent, from the Wii, and then it was sent from the smart fridge. So, parents, beware. If you're trying to shut down a savvy teenager, remember the smart refrigerator. That may be their channel to communicate with the waiting world. Any smart refrigerators, by the way, in your house, Jason, that may or may not be tweeting with your authorization?
Sadly, I have not gained access to a smart refrigerator yet. And in fact, my parents were looking for a microwave recently to replace one in their home that had long been past its prime. Hold on one second. We got a dog chewing on things we shouldn't be chewing on. Yeah, you need to stop that. And I did spend a couple of minutes looking at the Amazon Basics microwave, which does talk to Alexa. And I have decided that my parents would probably be a little side-eyed at that as a prospect in their home when updating. But it's to the point where there's a lot of internet connected stuff, and I buy the smart fridge. There's a lot of interesting applications on the smart fridges, things like scanning UPC codes and putting in reminders for when certain perishables expire, to remind you to use them. There's a lot of cool things that you can do in regards to data to that. But there's going to be a limit to where devices are smart for no reason, right? And I think I wouldn't say we're quickly heading to that direction, but I think you're going to start to see probably a mitigation of the new devices that you will see that are smart device-like. I actually recently purchased a smart switch for the first time, smart light switch. And the reason why I did it was that I'm not necessarily interested in a lot of smart switches in my house, although I'm super interested in trying to get one for our front light. That's our front porch light. That's be able to control that remotely and be able to turn it on via voice. There's a lot of interesting advantages there. But and the why I'm doing that is because to be frank, I'm terrified of switching out the light switch myself. I've watched 4 YouTube videos now. I'm convinced that I have the skill now, and it will do it without, burning down my house or zapping myself, but there are a lot of great applications for it, but let's not go overboard. There's a lot of ways that things become smart that really isn't so smart.
Yeah, the Internet of Things we've talked about before on the show. This is the huge market that companies are pivoting to, where we are having Wi-Fi, connections on all kinds of things. One sign of that is that it is extremely difficult to impossible now to buy a television that is not a quote smart TV,
Right.
because they are wanting all of those TVs to phone home and report on our watching behaviors. It is really important to have an eye towards security when you are purchasing anything for your house. I'll say that I'm interested also in being able to control like front lights around the holiday time. We put some Christmas lights up, and I actually have some switches. We do the like, and probably the fire marshal. I'm sure the fire marshal locally is watching this, so I'll be getting a visit from him very soon when I admit this. I don't know that it's actually super dangerous, but you put these outlet converters that convert a light bulb outlet, and it gives you a plug. And so that's how we're actually able to get some of those lights. Anyway, rather than just going for the smart bulb, I'm interested in replacing the switch on the wall, because that's how we're actually, turning on our lights on the outside, and then, Christmas lights as well. Haven't taken that step yet, but I'm definitely going to be taking a look at the companies, and to the degree it's possible, I'd like to see, what are these companies doing about security? Is this something that's hackable? We've talked, about on the show, it might have even been a year ago, but there was this huge attack called the Mirai botnet attack. And I know that sometimes these hacks and attacks get to be like, yes, it happened again. But this was an unprecedented one where these teenagers in Alaska who were hosting Minecraft games, created a program that was able to hack Internet of Things devices like home security cameras and other systems, and then use them in something called a denial of service attack, and actually brought some segments of the internet down. They had released it in the open, and it was being used by a lot of people. But anyway, crazy stuff. And so Internet of Things is here. It is going to continue to be a big thing. And I totally concur with you, Jason, that, there's companies that are going to throw stuff against the wall, see if it sticks. And we're going to, continue to see some silly things. That always happens at the Las Vegas, what's the show? You actually went to
the Consumer Electronics Show.
Right. Yeah. Where it's like, if it can have an internet connection, somebody's going to try to do that, whether that is a functional benefit or not. You got a little Christmas light action going there in the room, it looks like. So where are you coming from tonight? Is this basement again, or a different locale in the Knifer?
This is the master suite in our home. So
very good. We're getting a home tour. So week by week, folks, you can just wait with bated breath to see what new room in the Knifer, castle you're going to get to see a small tidbit of on the show. Just another benefit of being a video viewer of the EdTech Situation Room. Okay, well, I would like to actually shift to a bit of a more serious article, although, of course, that Internet of Things stuff is serious and security related. This is from the New York Times on August 11th, and the article is titled, "How YouTube Radicalized Brazil." And we have talked on the show quite a bit about the ways in which recommendation engines on YouTube as well as Facebook have been, strengthening echo chambers, and the ways in which targeted advertising and things have been amplifying divides and further polarizing our society, and et cetera. Boy, this is a really mind-blowing article that makes me fairly pessimistic about our prospects in the 2020 election. Basically, in Brazil, YouTube and the way in which it's amplified fringe, and in this case, right-wing content, has allowed folks that were politically unknown to not only, enter the political fray, but also be elected to power, including the presidency. And it really points to, I think, the need for the platforms, and here I'm speaking primarily of Google, YouTube, as well as Facebook, but also Twitter, to take responsibility for these incredibly powerful, tools of political, we could say manufactured consent, or I don't know what all the words for it is, but political manipulation, and address this. And so I know that there is a Netflix special, and someone just asked me about it today at school if I had seen it, that it is about Cambridge Analytica. I'm going to do my best to try and watch that. I'll get the name of it and try to put that into the show notes. I haven't seen it yet, but this is a great New York Times article. But while I'm kind of pessimistic, I think Dr. Neifer has amazing optimism for the political future. Is that right, Jason? Do you have some of our elected officials solved all the issues with the hearings they've had? And can I just put all of these doubts and concerns to bed?
Well, see, that's the problem, right? Unfortunately, I just don't think that we're making enough progress to say that social media is a safe space for a safe place for political discussions, right? It's interesting because I had made a comment on Twitter yesterday about the necessity to be mindful about emails before you shoot them off, and to not react emotionally to that messaging, since you have the advantage that you don't really need to, right? It's an asynchronous environment. And someone had made a smart comment that was pretty insightful. So in other words, don't treat it like Twitter, right? And it's that's a smart piece here, right? And that's one of the reasons why things get so ratcheted up when you just talk about issues discussions with friends, is the speed of the environment, and the fact that you can press a couple of buttons and have communication back and forth is a real interesting part of the environment. But we talked a lot about various congressional hearings. They've brought Facebook, Google, various other types of companies that are involved in the space into the hearings in Congress. They've also been called in front of British Parliament, the European Union Congress. That all of these bodies are working on some kind of piece here, and we're just not making any progress.
Yep, it is. We need to have some, I think, political ways to address this, and we're seeing Europe lead the way in that. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see anything in time for the 2020 election. Although, as we were talking at lunch today, actually at school, the U.S. military is not sitting by idly. There's stuff they're doing, but they're not necessarily advertising that. Hey,
Yep.
Question from the chat room. Peggy was asking, the previous article you talked about as far as rural broadband and connectivity and everything, you said kind of be careful, or we need to be wary. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Are you just talking about from a regulation standpoint, what kind of regulations get pushed out? Or
no, I think that it's a follow through with companies, right? I think a lot of people take large government efforts like this and pitch for billions of dollars in funding, and then don't actually follow through with the development of the broadband. And that's been an issue in eastern Montana, where a major telecom accepted federal funding to extend the fiber network in that region, only to find that not only were they not successful in finishing it, it then limited future funding opportunities because that area had already been paid for, in essence. And so I believe that government spending is a critical piece for infrastructure. I think that telecom is infrastructure in the United States, but we need to make sure we're getting the bang for our public buck.
Awesome. Evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that being here live and being able to put some things into the chat room can chart the course of the dialogue here on the EdTech Situation Room. Thank you, Peggy, for your question and for your response. Jason, where would you like to go next with our articles?
Well, let's talk some Apple. There's some interesting stuff that I want to hear your thoughts about, Wes. So the first one, this has been an announcement for a week or so, and Apple has sent out what I would call a lukewarm or maybe unsatisfying response. But Apple is turning on a feature in iOS that has been there for some time, but has been turned off, that essentially warns users that they are using invalid batteries. In other words, they are using third-party batteries that were placed in usually by one of dozens of chains across the United States that will do things like like put in batteries, and they are warning that they are dangerous. They are, I think, I read somewhere that it may impact updates at one point, and then it also obviously voids your warranty, which I think most people know before they go with a third party. I hate this. I have a big problem with the fact that phones are moving away from user replaceable batteries. I think that's a bad phenomenon. I would sacrifice a little bit of thinness and a little bit of lightness to have a user replaceable battery. But what is so smug about this is that it assumes that every user is near an Apple store, and that is simply not the case. Montana has 0 Apple stores. 0. There are none in the state. And again, to drive from end to end of it, you're looking at 12 hours anyways. So it's not like one in one corner of the state would serve, but I don't like the fact that you can't walk into an Apple store in any city in Montana. The closest one to us is a 5-hour drive from Missoula. And have an Apple technician take a look and replace the battery, which means your only option is to ship that phone in and lose it for, I'm assuming, a minimum of 3 days to be able to make that happen, and likely longer. So, Wes, I know you're a big Apple family. You do have Apple Store access. Does that change your mind about this issue?
Well, overall, I mean, with printers too, right? We've had companies, if you use third-party ink, you've destroyed your printer, and they've tried to use technology to actually stop that, because the money in printing, which is a little bit different, but in home printers is much more in the ink than it is the sale of the initial device. And so using intellectual property to try to, force you to go with their ink and whatever, it reminds me of a little bit of that. Overall, and I think this is, I don't know to the extent that this is an Apple thing, but we've just transitioned. I think finally there's a few more in a lab, but to another cart. We still have a few of the 2012 vintage MacBook Pros at our school, and those were workhorses. They are workhorses, right? We've gotten great return on investment on those. Replaceable battery, replaceable hard drive, right? You can crack that thing open and do a bunch of stuff. Upgrade the RAM. With our new MacBook Airs, I don't think we can open them at all and do anything with them without voiding a warranty. And so Apple it's just sort of it's not a disposable appliance in the same way you have kitchen appliances, but it definitely, reduces what you can do as a school IT department or as an individual when you want to update. And I definitely appreciate that Apple's battery and their software is really sophisticated in terms of knowing exactly how many charge cycles that you have, how long you've got it. But I will concur that the mail-in program is really not a great option. My wife and I became used Apple Watch wearers, and woohoo! My sister came to town and ended up getting a new one and sold her second generation Apple Watch. And my wife got that. And then I got on Swappa, which if you haven't used that before, swappa.com. We've bought a few different phones there and got the Apple Watch, a third generation Apple Watch. Anyway, my wife's the first night she had it, she was going to update it. And it essentially bricked. And we got on the phone, talked to Apple, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, mail that in. It's going to be $235 for us to look at this. Well, this is an $80 watch. And so, there's no way we're going to spend. I mean, you can get a new one, or I guess we could have gotten a third generation Apple Watch, new, I think, maybe for less than that. Anyway, it was crazy. And so we ended up going into the Apple store. Thankfully, we've got one here in Oklahoma City. And lo and behold, there's a little bleed over for somebody else's channel, I think. That was weird. Lo and behold, they were able to send it in for free to the repair facility, charged us $0. Watch came back, totally restored with software. If we were in Montana, we would not have had that recourse, and we would have, had to do something different. So I don't know. I realize that Apple is not going to be able to afford to put a store everywhere, but I also just kind of see that as the whole trajectory of where they are with their hardware platforms, which is really not empowering individual users or departments in technology, departments in schools or anywhere else to be able to replace them. So Yeah, wouldn't be really happy with that. I think I'm a little bit more like Steve Wozniak. He was the one really pushing Steve Jobs and pushing Apple. Have lots of expandability. Let people mess with their systems and customize. And Steve Jobs was much more, no, don't let them touch the inside of the beautiful system. And Jobs is kind of, for the most part, his legacy has won that. I think the new MacBook Pro, while it's crazily expensive, it definitely has a lot of expandability. But anyway, I'm sad to see that too. I would love to see us, get the same kind of return on investment that we had, let's say, out of those 2012 MacBook Pros, out of our new systems. And because we can't crack them open, we were able to put solid state drives in those and just, extend the life. And
right.
Anyway, we're not able to do that, but I think that's just part of a bigger transition that Apple's had to, you must come to us to do anything that you want in terms of change and upgrade.
And then another, and I can't remember if we talked about this one last week. I don't think we did, but I wanted to mention it. Apple's now reporting that the iPhone makes up less than half of Apple's business. And that is a mass shift towards services, right? They've been working on solidifying iCloud, making that a better app across platforms. They have obviously their television service that is rolling out. That they're looking to pick up less and less and less from the iPhone as a profit driver. I will be frank that at least from a school standpoint, I think the movement towards services is curious, because I hope that they continue to understand that hardware sales and then support to schools should continue to be a big part of its business, right? Like, it's that even though they are likely to sell TV subscriptions to schools, that needs to be an increasing part of that. So it may be good news from the broader standpoint of Apple longevity is the word I'm trying to say. I tried to mix three words into one there, longevity, but it would definitely not bring, I think, additional great services to schools.
Hey, Peggy's asking, would certified Apple techs in Montana be able to help with that, even though there's not an Apple store?
There's only two that I know of in a driving distance for me. One is pretty legit, although they weren't able to replace an iPad battery 2 years ago. They had to ship it out. And then the other one is sketchy. So
yeah, okay. Well, there's another Apple-related article that I put on, and as we often see with Apple, this is an overplayed headline, but this is from Forbes on August 12th. The headline is "Apple's iPhone nightmare is coming true." But they're pointing to the same statistics you're talking about, which is declining iPhone sales. And when you look at, the expense and cost of the high-end iPhones and reducing numbers of sales, and then, of course, we have lots of rumors about the latest iPhone. I don't think I dropped any of those links into the show notes, but basically, I think most people are thinking on the basis of the leaks and the regular kinds of things that come out of China and the places where these are being produced, that really won't be an earth-shattering redesign or update. And we'll continue to see some of leading edge features still on Android that we're not seeing on Apple. So anyway, it's saying that basically it takes a long time to ramp up services, and this is just from a income standpoint. Apple's fine; they're not going to be in financial dire straits here anytime soon. But their strategy is to try and get increased revenue from the handsets that they do sell, and then have that income. Have the shift in services, to be able to take up the difference and whatever. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, one of the most important things is going to be reliability. And then, from a school standpoint, educational technology, EdTech situation room here, our school is going to want to buy services from Apple. It'll be very interesting. We're using now the Jamf mobile device management platform, and that's been a huge transition. And thankfully, shout out to our new IT manager, Jeremy, who came to us from a sister school here in the local area. We say the school up the road, with tons of experience. I think he'd had like 80 hours of training in Jamf. And that mobile device management is essential today because Apple no longer supports what's called legacy imaging of your hardware. You have to use a mobile device management platform to be able to, manage your devices. So we're talking printers, software updates, restrictions that you might want to have on student devices or in labs or whatever. And so anyway, we are spending, X amount per computer per year for mobile device management. That is essential. That's an essential service that we cannot skip today. And that's a service. But Jamf is a third party. We continue to use a company called Tech Pilot. It used to be Tab Pilot. And let's see, it actually got purchased by Securely, I think. And so anyway, they're still Tech Pilot. But anyway, those are services that schools are having to pay for. And pretty much everyone in the enterprise that's managing devices is needing to have mobile device management. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Apple moves in that space. Are they going to, say, purchase Jamf? We had tentatively played with and even tried out to the point of spending some money, a solution called FileWave. And FileWave is a cross-platform, or it is touted as a cross-platform solution that can allow you to manage Windows desktops as well as your Apple devices. We honestly didn't have somebody with the expertise in dealing with that, and it is a sophisticated and complicated thing. You really need to have somebody certified with a lot of training hours, I firmly believe, to be able to use those platforms effectively. So I'm going to be interested to see how Apple moves in that space, because we're not buying .Mac, iCloud, whatever, space for faculty. We're not paying for Dropbox either, right? We're a Google campus. And I'm not going to comment publicly about Microsoft and what's happening right now as far as 365. But I will say, for our school, but what I will say is that, that is certainly Microsoft's vision, is that, yes, there's this free tier, but what you really need to do is pay for a subscription to Office 365. And they're even, pushing home users. I don't think I put that article in either, but there was something about, changes to, and ending, I think, support for Office 2019 and how they're just really pushing users to subscription. So what will Apple do in that respect? And then will their products that they have, be reliable and be, I think, rock solid in the same way that I would say Google has been, even though there's products that are canceled, et cetera. Google Drive's been really, really solid. Gmail is super solid. I don't see us transitioning off of those platforms anytime soon. So what will the services for schools be that Apple provides? That is an open question that remains to be answered.
Okay, and then one other just public service note, PC Magazine reported today that certain Mac Pros have been banned by the Federal Aviation Administration for flying on airplanes, and they're part of a recall. I would hope you'd already know about that, and I think I've read somewhere that Apple's actually sending direct messages through the operating system to those that are impacted by the recall. But this one's hard and probably won't impact you even if you have one of the suspect laptops. By the way, the laptops explode. That's why they've been recalled. It's been a battery explosion issue. I've read a number of articles, a number of comments on articles that say that the problem here is, what are they going to do? Look at your serial number. It's not like the Galaxy Note 7 issue where that had a distinctive form factor and all of them were recalled. But something to keep in mind if you're a Mac person. Take a look at these articles and make sure that you're not impacted.
Absolutely. Let's see. Let's talk about Kashmir real quick. I put this one down at the bottom under right above Geeks of the Week. Man, there is crazy stuff going on right now. If you're not tracking Hong Kong and what has been happening with the protests there and the ways in which the Chinese government is apparently going to be taking away a lot of the freedom and local sovereignty and autonomy that Hong Kong has enjoyed since the transition from British colonial empire rule. Lots of protests, and the news I heard this morning from NPR was saying they were talking about suspected terrorism, and there's some thought that maybe they're going to be cracking down on protesters in the name of terrorism. So that is happening, and we've talked on the show about the spike in, I think it was Telegram downloads as a secure messaging app, and the ways in which protesters have organized. They've worn masks to try to prevent facial recognition technology from being able to identify them. But it's really a very much pro-democracy movement where the people are saying, no, we want to remain, independent and not have you, big China coming in and making us like every other Chinese city. Well, shout out to The Daily, which is a wonderful New York Times produced podcast. I heard about Kashmir. And so this article is from the New York Times. It's titled Inside Kashmir, Cut Off from the World, a Living Hell of Anger and Fear. And this is from August the 10th. And basically, and I will try to put a link to the Daily show that talks about all the history, because like how many of us are really up on the history of Kashmir and the founding of India, in 1947 or whatever. So I'm going to draw on that. Basically, Kashmir has, which is a majority Muslim province, has enjoyed a lot of autonomy, but it's also been just really poor. And, Pakistan is a predominantly Islamic country that is, a nuclear power and that is a rival of India. India is a predominantly Hindu, but also very diverse country. Anyway, they have cut off. So basically what the Prime Minister of India has gone in to do is to cut, again, autonomy. So there's a little parallels to Hong Kong. But prior to this, in addition to like moving troops in and stuff, they completely cut off all internet, all cell phones, all telecommunication, and they have basically sealed off the entire province to prevent not only journalists but regular folks from being able to get the word out. And so they are attempting to completely suppress the communications environment so that politically, and I think they have martial law in place and people can't, go out. They want to, rewrite the political rules, and evidently the person whose name I should know, but I have not said it enough times to have it roll off my tongue, the current Prime Minister of India, who was reelected, felt like that he has the political support to try and change this situation. So both of those, from a technology standpoint, are extremely fascinating. The roles that technology, can play in the case of Hong Kong in organizing a protest, and in the case of Kashmir, the government trying to completely prevent that. So not announcing and really, telegraphing. I'm not thinking of the right word, but when you kind of show your card. So I don't know that people knew this was going to be happening. And so you really think of this as a military and security state operation where they have taken away the opportunity to have voice. So Jason, on your travel plans, I know you all have great bucket lists of travel. I'm just going to recommend that in the short term, at least, Hong Kong and Kashmir might not be the next places that you and the wife head out to visit.
It's funny you should mention that, because we're actually trying to plan a couple of trips, big trips, one a year for the next couple of years. And Japan is on our list, Thailand's on our list, and southern Spain is on our list for Christmas trips the next couple of years. But we also are super interested in both China and India. And I don't know. I've never been scared off of a location due to world crises, and admittedly, I tend to I've spent more time in Western Europe than anywhere else, right? So it's not like I'm heading off for those kinds of adventures. But I've had a friend that worked for a long time in Hong Kong, and he's now back in the States. But it's a great tourist destination, as it turns out. So, and I've been listening. NPR has excellent coverage on the issue in Hong Kong.
Hey, shout out to Lori Green, who is tuning in with Facebook Live. Says don't count all of us out on not knowing about this with world politics. So yay, the good followers of the EdTech Situation Room tracking with that. I think the reason I said that was because I mentioned it today at lunch, and I don't think any of the teachers that were there. I don't know. I don't know how many people have been tracking with it. So it's definitely great for folks to be tracking with it. And it's an example of, a hugely important current event that has lots of ramifications and the ways in which technology is being used there and voices are being suppressed. That what an important thing to talk about with students and to be aware of, and then also to consider the ways in which we might or might not try and advocate on behalf of those that are affected in those situations. I mean, can you imagine having all of your cell phone and internet just cut off and not being able to either send or receive information today? That seems like it would be a jarring and shocking situation. And then, yeah, I guess you're just going to turn on the state-sponsored TV then at that point, right?
Yeah, sadly so. So, well, I want one more technical one that's got some interesting stuff going on this week, and then we're quickly approaching the top of the hour. So, some interesting Google news. First, this one probably there's other interesting stuff in this week, but this is one that I read about deeply today, and I'm blown away by. Google has announced that they have turned CourseKit, which was their open source framework for developing online content for teaching purposes, and they've rolled it into something called Assignment, Google Assignments. And this is probably only super exciting to a small percentage of our listeners, but basically what Course Assignment allows you to do is take a Google Classroom-like interface and offer it as an LTI object, which is suckable into a learning management system. So,
to use a technical term.
Yeah, to use a technical term, suckupable into a learning management system. So for those of you that are unaware of learning management systems beyond the very popular ones today, like Edmodo, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, for the classroom, essentially you can add a Google Classroom-like interface to use Google Docs in something like Moodle. And so my partner in crime at work and I, Mike Agostinelli, today were rejoicing. There was many screams of cheer that we are able to use this interface now. It's not fully rolled out yet, but if you're in the distance learning world, or more importantly, if you manage Moodle or a like LMS, this is a wonderful option to add in, that very powerful editing and sharing interface into your learning management system. So good on the Googles.
That is awesome. I want to do two more quick ones here, and I'm just dropping this link in right now. Jason, have you heard yet of Harmony OS? Am I going to actually have an Android headline first before you? Or
yeah, it's the Huawei alternative OS, right?
Exactly. So this is a Forbes article from August 10th. Move over Android. Huawei's Harmony OS is Plan B, but it could be implemented, quote, in days if needed. And so we have been talking on the show for a number of weeks about the really bizarre and interesting things that are happening with China and the United States, especially with regard to talking about 5G rollout and Huawei, the prohibition of using, Huawei devices, the encouragement that the U.S. is trying to give to, and even strong arm tactics to countries not to adopt Huawei hardware, in its next generation 5G hardware that is being deployed right now. The arrest of the CFO of Huawei in Canada, pending extradition to the United States, which I haven't followed up on that to know if she's still there. So anyway, this next chapter is, Google had announced that it was going to be cutting off support for some devices. And so there was certain Huawei phones were going to have Android, but then there's a question about, well, will they all have it? And then what's going to happen? So Harmony OS is this alternative operating system, which has evidently been developed by the Chinese cell phone manufacturer Huawei. And then they're going to be poised to be able to utilize this if needed. Now, because of app development and app developers, let's say Huawei does dump Android and they just go Harmony OS. I don't know how many folks outside of China are going to want to purchase a phone that can't run Android, and how many app developers are going to rush into the open arms of Harmony OS. I don't know. But your thoughts on this Android using Dr. Neifer? Are you ready to somehow procure a Harmony OS and Huawei device, and ditch this Android thing?
Well, it's funny because it's compatible with Android because it's built on top of open source versions of Android, right? So that's something that was, I think, kind of inevitable, and it's the Amazon strategy, right? Like Amazon builds their operating system for mobile devices, tablets, on top of open source Android. That's why the apps are theoretically compatible. I think the world's better when there are more options, right? In the same way that I would never force my preferred operating system onto others. I'm currently a Chrome OS guy. I've been very happy with the Chrome world. I think it's better when we have 3, 4, 5, 6 different competitors, as long as there's compatibility for broadly software suites. And the more the internet becomes functional on its own, it doesn't really matter what operating system you're using, because as long as you can get to the web, you'd have access to materials in a meaningful way. But that I don't really have a formed opinion about what is happening to Huawei, and in fact broadly about globalization as it relates to technology trade in China. But I can say it wouldn't be surprising to me, in fact, a lot of Chinese phones that are running technically Android aren't even using Android. They're using a skinned version of Android that looks like iPhones. That's a very common phenomenon in China. So yeah, the more operating systems there are, the better.
Yeah. Okay, well, one more quick article at least from me, and this will kind of segue into my Geek of the Week. I put this one under Google. This is a couple months old, so this is from NextWeb on June the 14th, 2019. The article title is YouTube Recommendations Are Toxic, Says the Dev Who Worked on the Algorithm. I think I actually found this article perhaps from that New York Times article. And so anyway, it is talking about, again, like the Brazil article, the radicalizing potential of YouTube, and how quickly, if you're watching YouTube because of its recommendation engine and autoplay, YouTube's objective has been, and probably still is, to try to get folks to watch as much as possible, because you're going to be seeing more ads, and they're going to be generating more revenue. And so, this whole idea, like we had a parent university session in April. I think it was in April. We had a couple at the end of the year last year, and one of them was, let's talk about YouTube. The power of YouTube to influence minds, and certainly for students following, YouTube stars. Ask some teens today. I mean, who are you following on YouTube? Who are the what are the big channels that you like to watch? There is a lot of product placement, and they're called influencers, right? The folks that are, obviously Jason and I are key influencers in the teen world. No, we're not that target market, but there's a lot of folks that are making their living on YouTube, and they're sharing a lot of things about products that they like, but also sometimes products that they themselves sponsor. And that whole landscape is not just benign in terms of, oh, look, they're wanting it, they're not wanting Izod, they're wanting, whatever the brand du jour is. There's a lot of real outlier content and ways in which fringe, and even we could say pretty dangerous ideas with respect to white supremacy, hate speech, the shooters that we've seen, in New Zealand. I think the El Paso shooter wasn't 4chan, it was 8chan. The manifestos that have been published there, and the ways in which people who are engaging in not only criminal but arguably terrorist type violent acts are being encouraged, and folks are, as we can see in the case of Brazil, being arguably radicalized. So that's an important thing to be aware of. And so I'll just actually, is it okay if I do my Geek of the Week, or do you have another article? Okay, so my Geek of the Week segues to that, and it is a website called Algo Transparency. And so what this website lets you do is track how YouTube recommendations are working. So for instance, you can put in the word Brazil, you could put in a date, and you can, I guess Brazil's really not. Let me go up to the top and say top 25 verbs. So the robot is observing 8.9 million recommendations over a 6-month period for more than 1,000 channels available. For each keyword in the title, we looked at the number of recommendations divided by the number of videos, and we display below the 25 verbs at the third person singular present that recorded the highest. And so these words are like dismantles, educates, debunks, snaps, realizes. And so you can see how many recommendations per video are going to be based on this. And anyway, and then there's a YouTube map that is showing you kind of, it's sort of word cloudish, but what are the different words, and you can click on that and kind of dive into it. It's fascinating. I have just begun to explore that. But I think this kind of a tool, I'll read you the aims of the project. We aim to inform citizens on the mechanisms behind the algorithms that determine and shape our access to information. YouTube is the first platform on which we've conducted the experiment. We're currently developing tools for other platforms. So we can think about this perhaps as a window, but an interactive window that can allow you to gain some insight into how the recommendation engine of YouTube works. And if you happen to be doing anything around media literacy today with students or as a researcher, this is powerful. Peggy's asking in the chat room, can you just turn off YouTube recommendations? And there are certainly ways that you can turn off advertising, and for individual videos, like when you're sharing them with students, there's tools like Safe YouTube and other things that can, share the videos stripped of all the comments and all the recommendations. But there's not a way to just completely, to my knowledge, turn off recommendations. Again, when you're sharing a single video, there's QuietTube. There's a lot of different, little bookmarklets and extensions that you can use. Of course, we got to be really careful with extensions because you may, end up installing something malicious on your device. So you want to be careful whenever you're installing things like that. But anyway, that's the Geek of the Week. And if anybody ends up using that and exploring with that, I would love to know what you discover. I'm going back in the classroom this year and working with 5th and 6th graders. So we'll be talking about advertising and I think a little bit of propaganda. I don't think we're going to be going heavily into social media weaponization, but these kinds of tools that are going to allow us to peer into the algorithms and see the ways in which the things that we're watching and seeing are being, crafted and shaped, and people are making these algorithms. I think those are really powerful, and it's important for us to have students recognize that and then to think about all the ethics around those algorithms.
Great. Thanks, Wes. And then my Geek of the Week is just a technical tip. We've talked about this a couple times in the past on the podcast, but Google's original high-end Chromebook, the Chromebook Pixel from 2013, is end of life. It is no longer receiving updates from the good folks at Google. But as I had mentioned, I thought Cloud Ready, which is an open source version of Chrome OS that you can install yourself for free if you're a home user, is now installable on the Pixel 2013. And there's a wonderful guide on iFixit by Kevin Purdy, formerly of Lifehacker fame, and now a blogger, a tech blogger and writer at iFixit. And it does require a little bit of a hardware hack. You have to go in and pop off the back cover and remove a screw so you can actually go in and update the computer's firmware to be able to accept the new operating system. But that's a wonderful piece of hardware that's no longer supported by Google, and it is supported by Cloud. Well, not officially, but works with Cloud Ready. So if you have one of those devices, or if you want to go buy a nice Chromebook on eBay for $150, that's got an i5 chip in it and a wonderful screen and keyboard, this would be a way to keep that fresh and up to date.
Awesome. Hey, and I put this up on the chat, but Lori Green is saying via Facebook Live that the example there that we were just talking about, the algo transparency, is a good tool for districts and teachers to use to learn about AI and how all of this works. And yay. I hope it is. So that's why we like to do the Geeks of the Week. And we want to remind everybody that if you'd like to go back and see Geeks of the Week and all that stuff, Jason, is it possible? Is this like Snapchat? Is all this stuff just... gone into the
Totally
vapor?
gone. No, good news. You can go to our website, edtechsr.com/links, and see all the links we share on any given week. And then also that website, you can download teeny tiny copies of the podcast, or you can see the show notes about the specific links we talked about in every other episode. Wes, where can we find you on the internet?
I am on Twitter at WFryer, and I am blogging as well as podcasting a bit on speedofcreativity.org. I also anticipate that in upcoming weeks, as we move into the school year, we'll be updating some resources on our digital citizenship website for students, parents, and community constituents, and that is on digcit, digcit.us. How about you, Dr. Neifer?
I am on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach. I blog for the Northwest Council for Computer Education, blog.ncce.org. And I will say that not written by me, but we have a partnership with Common Sense Media, and we've been publishing some of their materials the last couple of weeks in the blog, and it's really good stuff. So go check out that. But this thing here is not social media. This is a podcast. We are the EdTech Situation Room, and you can watch us every Wednesday night, or most Wednesday nights, at 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central, and 3 a.m. UTC, I think, if you know.
Really early in the morning if you're out there.
Yeah, probably not realistic to see us live if you are in Western Europe, but if you want to come see us live, we post out a live show link out at the time we broadcast. We'd love to have guests in either our Facebook or YouTube audience. We're available in both locations now. Or you can download us wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. Until next time, we hope you stay safe, you stay savvy, and we bid you a good morning, good day, or good evening.